Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame. And today we have another big episode for you. And before we get into today's topic, I really want to just take a minute to celebrate and send gratitude and love to each of our listeners who have taken the time to leave a 5-star review here on the show, on the podcast. It really makes a huge difference to help this podcast get in front of even more women and help even more people understand and heal these root causes that are driving them to eat with food. So huge shout out. Thank you for each of you who have taken the time to leave a review either on Apple or Spotify. And if you haven't yet, please come on over and do that. Share about your biggest takeaways from the show and just leave that review there, which really helps me so much get this message out there in such a big way. Because today's topic is a big one, and I want as many people as possible to be able to have access to what I'm about to share. And not just today, but obviously over the last year and a bit since launching this podcast. And the way the algorithm works, of course, like the reviews really help me, get in front of more eyes. So today is an important one. And that's why I'm asking here. I'm starting today with this ask to leave the review and help this get out there more, because I feel like this conversation that we're having today is one of the biggest, most powerful things that any of us can do in terms of how we choose to show up when life gets difficult, instead of turning to food, but using these instances, these situations, these conversations as a chance for growth instead. And we're going to be talking about that today, how we can actually use triggering situations to fuel our growth, to help us uncover our traumas and heal our traumas in a way that lasts, right? Ultimately, we're continuing to dig into what's really going on below the surface with our addictive patterns with sugar. And I think the way that we look at difficult situations in life or triggering situations is one of the biggest shifts that any of us can make, and is actually mandatory to start operating through this different way of being and living and seeing things if you ever really want to be free from the addictive patterns with food and with anything in your life. So this is why this is an important episode. Now, before we get even deeper and actually officially get started with this, I want to share some exciting news. As you know, I am now just over a month away from hosting my first ever in-person retreat called the Sugar Freedom Embodiment Retreat. And I am so thrilled by each of the women who have already said yes to joining us. There are still a few spots left for those of you who are last-minute planners, but don't wait too long, because this is absolutely going to fill up. And if you want to know more information, I want to just mention and highlight that the episode right before this one, I recorded specifically to share all the details and share a little bit more about why I'm hosting this retreat and exactly what you can expect. And more importantly, why this retreat is so unique and so different than perhaps other yoga retreats you've been to or wellness retreats. What I'm doing and what we're actually going to be doing together at the Sugar Freedom Embodiment Retreat is radically different than retreats that you've been to in the past. So I just want to point that out. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, go back, listen to that one, and of course, come on over and apply to join us or reach out if you have any questions. I'm actually, at the time of recording this, in the planning process for meals. I'm really excited about this part. And one of the many things that is going to make this retreat so unique is that I'm actually curating, obviously, a very blood sugar friendly meal plan for everyone who's attending. And each of the women attending are actually going to be participating in cooking their own meals. And this is a really big part of facing and discovering actual joy and connection in the kitchen again. So we're actually doing this together. You will never be cooking on your own. We're going to have teams, and you're going to be with your fellow sisters cooking these nourishing meals, learning new skills in the kitchen, and leaving this retreat feeling so much more confident and excited about being in your own kitchen. So I'm going to be teaching you all these tools, and you're going to be in there getting your hands dirty, actually getting in there, connecting with your food in a really beautiful way. I know one of the biggest blocks that so many of you listening and so many women that work with me around eating and cooking nourishing meals are the limiting beliefs that show up. The cooking is a waste of time, cooking is boring, cooking healthy is tasteless and a waste of time, right? All of these beliefs that show up that have been probably handed down from our childhood, we're going to face these head on in the retreat. And this is a really special part of what I'm weaving into what we're doing together, so you can actually connect and build the confidence and the skills and essentially begin your journey to becoming a master chef, becoming comfortable in the kitchen. And not only that, but actually enjoying being in the kitchen, starting to see it and feel it as a self-love and self-care activity. So it's going to be really, really cool. I'm excited about the meals that I'm selecting. And of course, working in based off the women who have already joined, we're having discussions about what any dietary restrictions and things like that. But of course, it's all blood sugar friendly, and it's going to be so delicious. I can't wait just to gather on the ocean and eat these amazing, nourishing meals together and laugh and connect and just bring this essence of joy and connectivity into eating healthy food. One of the other things that we're doing at the retreat is exactly what I'm talking about today. And we're going to slide into this topic and conversation that I want to open up today, is all about really creating a baseline strategy to deal with triggers and difficult situations in life when they arise. And this is going to be a big part of what we're doing together in person at the retreat. I have some very important and powerful activities that we're going to be doing together that actually teaches us how to see things differently and how to really change the way that our mind works, essentially, when life gets hard. Because let's face it, most of you right now are in this situation, and I wish we were in a room together because I could ask you to raise your hand, and most of you would have your hand up here when I ask, how do you handle, or more importantly, when difficult situations arise in life, whether it's a fight with a friend or a loved one or your partner, or, a difficult situation at work, your boss is upset at you, he's done something that pisses you off, right? And there's difficult situations or triggers or arguments or fights or whatever it is that shows up every day, every week as being a human. Do you turn to food? Is food, and more importantly, sugar or alcohol or wine, your go-to to cope and numb out, because it's difficult? Confrontation is really difficult. I know a lot of listeners here resonate with being introverts or highly sensitive, and confrontation is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying, right? If there's an argument that's happening or a fight or a disagreement, those sorts of situations can bring up a whole bunch of insecurities and a whole bunch of uncertainty. And essentially what I'm calling, being triggered, which I know is a very overused term in this day and age, but it simplifies really what we're talking about today, is these radical situations that we get in as human beings, whether it's with a certain situation that's unfolding in your life or around you or in the world around you, or a specific interaction in relationship with another human, right? Or multiple other humans. And these situations arise to trigger us, right? And often these triggering situations are obviously really deeply emotional, very frustrating, and bring up a lot of discomfort in the body. And most of us humans, 99% of us humans, have never had a good example of actually how to process big emotions, let alone how to actually understand them, honor them, and validate them. So instead, what happens in these situations when we are triggered, we begin creating all sorts of stories in our head. We start creating stories about what it means about us, what that other person's motive is, what that person's just trying to hurt me, right? And then we get into rumination, where we just overthink. We're thinking and thinking, oh, what did they say? What did they mean? A lot of times these situations are maybe in email form or text message, which just makes it so much worse. So there's this conflict that's happening, right? And both parties, let's say, for example, this is a relationship issue that's being had, right? That's been triggering. Maybe somebody said something that triggered you and has upset you. Right, and we get into rumination and we start making more stories, start making beliefs. And a lot of the thoughts that are coming through are really based off of our beliefs about ourselves. And we're going to talk about this, right? And at the time of actually recording this episode, I want all of you to know that I am currently in the middle of exactly what I'm talking about here. There are some big triggers showing up for me right here, right now, as I'm recording this with a very close friend, with my dad, and with certain situations that are sort of unfolding more generally, situationally in my life that are really, really agitating me, really bringing up a lot of big emotions, and quite honestly, just making me feel a little bit crazy right now, as I'm trying to figure out the way through this and through these triggering situations with the people that are involved, and also with understanding what I need in this. So I share that because I want you to know that this is very raw and real for me right now. And I very deeply understand how triggering situations or conversations come up in our lives often. And until you can start to see these situations and approach these situations through the lens of, this is teaching me something to grow. What is being shown to me here? What wound is being stepped on? We're going to talk more about this. This will make sense in a minute. Versus how most of you, and I used to do this as well, will respond in those situations, right? We'll get defensive. We'll put it on the other person. We'll do everything we can to sort of make ourselves look good, or retaliate. There's a lot of retaliation, right? If somebody's yelling at you, you're going to yell right back at them, right? Like there's a lot of reactionary, right? Reacting as opposed to, assessing and taking a pause to understand what's actually going on in the situation, which is usually not what's actually in the moment. You can't see it. So from this reactionary standpoint to instead understanding that triggering situations, people in your life, are a chance for you to actually grow and heal yourself. So I'm going to explain what this means, but this is essentially, the big picture view of the mindset shift that I'm inviting all of you to make today and to begin making. This took me, honestly, a few years to get a handle on, and I'm still learning and growing. But when we can start to see life's challenges and ups and downs as opportunities to learn about ourselves, it takes away so much pressure and guilt and shame and energetic emotional charge, and really actually fuels our empowerment and our sense of self and our confidence in ourselves. There's so many gifts here when we start to see these difficult situations as a chance to learn, instead of, like I said earlier, playing victim. Most of us, and I've done episodes on this here on the podcast, live life in victim mentality. Well, it's their fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I can't believe they're treating me that way. They made me feel this way. A lot of blame. And a lot of putting things on other people or situations, right? That may be probably out of our control. So what we can control is how we respond. We've heard this before, right? When someone yells at us, for instance, or someone cuts us off in traffic, right? That's a triggering situation maybe for you. How you choose to respond is really going to dictate your success in learning how to regulate your nervous system and learning how to support yourself without needing to escape, right? Without needing to numb out and escape with food. You're going to be able to face these emotions and understand them and give yourself the space that they need to come to, understanding and come to completion. So how do you know that you're triggered? This kind of seems like a silly question, but I want to share a few things here, because oftentimes we're so busy with life that we don't even know that we've been triggered. Most of the time when it's a really big trigger, right? You know that something has been stepped on here and you are triggered. Okay, so things like you're feeling cranky. Maybe you're feeling really short-tempered with one person or all sorts of people. You really know that, someone so-and-so has pissed me off, right? Or I can't believe that person cut me off in traffic today. Maybe you're even feeling really just kind of icky or upset or heavy in your body. I know lately I've just been feeling, the word that comes up for me is blue. Like I've just been feeling really blue. I've been feeling a lot of sadness, a lot of heaviness, just a lot of blah. You might also have really unjustified outbursts and displays of big emotions, right? Like maybe you're just bursting into tears, or you're yelling at the grocery store clerk for no reason, or maybe you even notice that you start shaking a little bit. And these are all signs that there's a big energy that is trying to come out and trying to move in your body because there's something that has been triggered. So paying attention to like, how are you showing up on a daily basis or in a certain situation that may feel out of place, right? Maybe nothing strange has happened in your household, but all of a sudden you're yelling at your partner and you realize like, it was actually because I was triggered earlier from my boss, or something happened that brought up some things and I stuffed it down and now it's boiling out at the wrong time. So these are all, again, just an invitation for you. And that's going to be, I'll remind you again at the end, the invitation here is to start becoming aware of when you're triggered and start noticing, more importantly, in your body, what's coming up. Noticing, is your heart rate increasing? Is your jaw tensing? Do you feel tightness in your chest? I know that's always a big one for me. I just start feeling really like knots in my stomach, really heavy in my chest and my heart. And of course, noticing your mood, noticing your behaviors. These are really, really good telltale signs to help you understand if you've been triggered or not. Most of us know. A lot of times, you know if it's something big, you are pissed off and right? Or you're catching yourself in the blaming. Oh, so-and-so did this, and you're just venting to someone else and blaming everyone else around you. So how instead can you begin to see these triggering situations and these difficult situations that show up in life as an actual gift and tool that you can use for your own healing? How can you begin to do this? So the first thing here, and this is one of the most powerful mindset shifts that I've ever made, is to recognize and understand that triggering situation or conversation is actually a chance for you to understand your unhealthy patterns and your trauma patterns. Okay, I love kind of thinking of this, right? Thinking of the world as your mirror. So the people in your life are there to mirror back your own shit to you. And it's not about them. This is actually an opportunity for you to understand yourself better, your values, your needs, your beliefs, your boundaries, your trauma patterns, your wounds. So when we think of every single human in our life, every single interaction, whether it's a grocery store clerk, that person that cut you off in traffic, your best friend, your parents, they are all mirrors for you to get curious about what they are showing you. So this is your chance when a very triggering situation comes up. It is such a beautiful opportunity for you to ask, what is this showing me about me? What am I learning here about what I need, what I'm not getting, what boundaries need to be set, what traumas are still present, what wounds are still present? Because the truth is, when you are feeling triggered in any situation or interaction, you are only upset because a wound of yours has been stepped on. This has nothing to do with someone else. It is your wound that has been stepped on. And usually it's a very deep core wound, especially if it feels like a really big trigger. So for instance, this person cutting you off in traffic, right? Could very well be, and you're absolutely just upset. You're so livid angry. I can't believe this person cut me off. You having this big emotional reaction. This could very well be stepping on some very big fears. Fear of death, right? If that person is driving dangerously and almost caused a car accident, right? Wow, that was close. I'm afraid. I was afraid that I almost died there, right? It could be a fear of being disrespected. Maybe that's something that's shown up for you in your whole life, or someone, just cutting you off in life in general, energetically. Maybe you've spent your whole life being cut off, right? Or not being fully respected, right? In whatever direction you were going in life. So there's a lot that we can analyze and start getting curious about, why is this so triggering for me, right? When the truth is that person that cut you off in traffic may be in an emergency situation trying to get to the hospital, right? You don't know, right? We just assume and we start making up stories. This person is mean. They hate me. Like they're just a horrible human. I can't believe they would do this to me. So instead, this could be an opportunity to be like, why was that so triggering? Maybe you feeling like you're in a rush and you were going to be late for something, and you get to look now, well, why am I always in such a rush? Why don't I have an extra couple minutes to deal with traffic? So there's a lot, right? When we can actually start to see situations and people as our mirrors, and understanding that the only reason we are having an emotional reaction is because a wound of ours has been stepped on. If someone cuts me off in traffic and I'm feeling calm and I'm good and I don't have any baggage around like people cutting me off, I'm not going to let it faze me. It's not going to trigger me. I'm going to put on my brakes. I'm going to slow down. I might go into another lane and stop following that person if they're driving dangerously. I'm just going to adjust and get on with my day versus being triggered. So in any situation, your triggering reaction is because of your wounding. And this is a beautiful opportunity to understand that better. Another reason that most of us are triggered is when a boundary's been crossed or we've been disrespected, right? That's another way of saying that. And often we don't know that a boundary's been crossed. We don't have the language for it, especially not in the moment. It just feels shitty, right? We just feel upset. We feel triggered. But as a few days pass, we can start to maybe reflect that, wow, it was because this person didn't respect my space or a boundary that I set, right? When I asked them not to call me past 9:00 at night, and here they are leaving me 12 voice notes at midnight, right? Like those little small things can be really triggering, and we can understand, oh, it's because they're not respecting a boundary. And this is such a great time because most of us don't know we need to put a boundary in place until it's been crossed. And then we have these triggering situations that are actually a gift to remind us like, oh, I need to set a boundary there. I should tell that person, please don't call me past 9. I haven't actually communicated that. So I need to actually set that boundary. So this is a chance to, again, learn, like, was there a boundary that was overstepped, right? Is there more communication that needs to happen here in a situation? Again, all this practice of using these situations as a mirror. So the second thing here, number one being this chance, right? That the world is our mirror, and we get to understand that what wound has been stepped on for us, what boundary has been crossed for us. So really starting to look at everything, every triggering situation as a mirror for your own inner growth. The second gift here when triggering situations arise is actually being able to access your feelings and emotions more easily when they're on the surface. I know I work with a lot of my clients, and actually currently in my emotional empowerment program, we're nearing the end of that program. And this conversation has come up at the beginning when we started, I think in week 2 or week 3, around, trying to sit with our emotions, trying to be with our emotions every day and nothing coming up, right? Like as we build this deep healing relationship with honoring our emotions and opening up, tearing down the walls that we've all put up for protection around feeling pain and emotions, sometimes it can be really difficult to just sit there and call an emotion forward. It usually doesn't happen, especially for most of us who have the walls up, right? And we just have learned to not feel because it wasn't safe. So when we get triggered, this is actually a beautiful crack and kind of an entryway into doing the emotional work. So this is such a gift because on a day-to-day basis, you might be feeling flat and you're not being able to connect with emotions, but bam, as soon as someone yells at you or someone cuts you off in traffic, you can access these emotions like, oh, here comes the anger, here comes the sadness or the heartache, and you can more readily be with these emotions and start practicing the tools that we're not going to dive into today, but I've shared on the podcast before, and we obviously go really deep into in the emotional empowerment program, is to begin practice making friends with these emotions and then learning how to process them, right? Moving the energy through the body with different techniques that I teach in my programs. So this is just a gift. I just want you to see this as a gift, is these big emotions coming to the surface are such a great tool and an opportunity for you to harness not only like learning how to feel emotions and be with your emotions and validate them, as opposed to the old pattern of making them go away, stuffing them down with food, but you also get to practice now building new tools to process. I'm doing that as we speak, really leaning on my toolbox as some really big tornado of emotions. I'm actually feeling a lot of things with all these different situations that I'm currently being triggered by that are really causing me to lean into some very big tools, and making sure that I get out in nature every day, getting in my garden, getting into my sauna. I love for moving energy, voice activation is really big for me. So I do a lot of chanting, moving my body, venting, to loved ones that can hold me in this space. So there's a lot of tools here to help me process what's coming up, along with the crying, right? There's so many beautiful processing techniques that our emotions call us to use in order to fully be processed. So this is gift number 2 of triggering situations, is to use them to do the emotional work and access these big emotions more easily. Gift number 3 is really this beautiful opportunity in triggering situations for you to step out of victim mode and begin practicing taking responsibility for your life and your emotions. So this is a really big one. So much we blame other people for making us feel a certain way, when the truth is we feel a certain way because of our own internal landscape. It has nothing to do with the other person. The other person can say nasty things, right? And most likely it hurts even more when we believe those nasty things about ourselves. And we have our own insecurities. So these triggering situations, again, tying into the first, gift here that I shared around the world being our mirror, you get to practice. Am I going to choose to respond in victim mentality, blame, put it on the other person? Or am I going to take personal responsibility for my healing, my life, my emotions, and my reaction here? And this takes practice, ladies. This is years of practice. This is hard, right? And I know a lot of you might already be thinking as I'm sharing this, like, well, this all sounds great, Dani, but in the moment when I'm triggered, my go-to is to lash out, and there's no thought. And this is really important to just mention as well, that this is very normal, right? To lash out in the moment. There's almost this part of your brain that takes over, right? The rational thinking is gone and you are just in like fight or flight mode, right? And most of us, it's maybe fight, or it's just to retreat and run away. Like, what is your, emergency nervous system immediate reaction? And as you work to repattern your nervous system, which is a whole nother conversation, you're able to take a pause when you notice that you're being triggered. So this is really important to say, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but this feels really, really, really valid and important, is when you are in being triggered and you notice like, I am triggered, right? The practice is to take pause here and notice before responding, before flipping that person off who cut you off in traffic, before yelling at them, before yelling back at someone who started yelling at you. And this is really hard. And I totally admit that even for myself. So just know that if you're not perfect at this right away, that's okay. Creating that pause, I'm triggered, I'm going to take a minute, takes a lot of practice. So just know that your rational brain in a triggering situation, especially if your subconscious feels like it's actually life or death, which oftentimes that's what your subconscious brain is thinking, it can be really hard to think rationally, right? And use any of these tools that I'm sharing with you. So just know that you don't have to be perfect in the moment, But this is a practice of creating pause. And we're going to actually talk about that a little bit, about what do you actually do the moment you notice you're triggered. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But I just want to inject that here to know that all these things that I'm sharing about using this for your own healing, looking inward, tapping into these emotions, can be done after the triggering situation. And oftentimes it's best, right, to do alone, to do after you've disengaged in triggering conversation, or you're no longer in that triggering situation. Then you can start to go in and do some reflecting. Okay, so giving yourself some space first. It doesn't have to be, this isn't all done in the moment. This is actually done over days and weeks and months sometimes. And that's what I'm working on now. It's been days and weeks and months with some of the things that I've been triggered by, that I'm still percolating on and processing and understanding my own wounds in it. Okay, so gift number 4, back to the list here of, how these triggers can actually be gifts, right, in our healing journey. Number 4 is that these triggering situations really deeply help you learn and teach you what you actually need. If you're willing to ask that question, what do I need here? What is really going on? And supporting you in possibly getting even better at communicating. Oftentimes triggers can arise, and one of my situations right now that I'm going through is very much in this realm, where there's miscommunication about needs. And if I feel like I'm expressing a need and it's not being met by the other person, it's going to be really hurtful and really triggering. But if I'm not effectively communicating my need, right, to the other person, and they don't actually understand it, so they're not able to give it to me, it just creates this whole mess, right? A really big mess. So not only do these situations help you really learn what you need, right? I need to give myself more time so I'm not in a rush while I'm driving to work and getting triggered by people cutting me off. Or I need more conversations in this relationship, or I need more time, one-on-one quality time with this person, or I need more support at work from my boss. Like, what are the things that are showing up here that maybe the reason you're triggered is because you're not getting what you need? And maybe the other person is also not getting what they need. And then there's this deep need for good communication, right? And conflict resolution and all of that, which maybe will be an episode for another time. But really just seeing that these triggering situations can be this gift to teach you what you need. And the 5th gift here that I've already mentioned a few times is you can really learn what boundaries you need. Oftentimes we do not know we needed a boundary until it's been stepped on or crossed over, right? So triggering situations, when you analyze, when you can actually see, why am I triggered? Why is this so upsetting? Why am I having such a powerful emotional reaction to this comment, this situation? By the way, our family members, especially our parents, are the best at this. The best place to practice feeling triggered, right? We all have something that our moms do or say that just irk us, right? This is such an opportunity for growth. Why is that so upsetting for me, right? And is there a boundary I need here? And lastly, number 6 here there's so many gifts that these triggering situations can give us, but number 6 here that I want to share is really a deeper understanding of your authentic self, right? When we go through these triggering situations, especially when we start understanding our core wounds and our boundaries and our needs, like all of this reflection, inward reflection and introspection helps us really uncover deeper layers of who we truly are and who we truly want to be, and what areas we still need to work on, what areas still need healing. I know I'm learning a lot about that right now, about the wounds that I thought I had healed, but obviously not. They're still there. And now I get to create a plan for myself to work on these wounds, right? And continue the processing or the repatterning of the traumas that are showing up for me in these triggering situations. So I hope by now you can see that the challenges that show up in your life, as crazy difficult as they are, and believe me, I get it. I've just been through a lot of this and it's been intense and I am exhausted and the emotions are still really, really swirling around in me and it's uncomfortable, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And, this way of choosing to live life is, in my opinion, where true freedom comes from. right? Really learning to take responsibility for our life and grow and learn and improve ourselves, right? And become better. And to admit in situations where we were wrong. This is one of the biggest personal growth journeys, is actually to understand, wow, yeah, I did not communicate effectively, or I did lash out and that was not kind. And being able to apologize for those things, or being able to just acknowledge, like, yeah, I wasn't at my highest self yesterday when I sent that text message, or whatever it is, right? In those conflicts, that's really important, because when you start understanding, like, wow, my core wounds are being triggered here, I want that other person to know it, right? That I'm taking ownership for, like, my shit's really coming up here. And here's what I need to work through that, either together or by myself. And we can start to communicate what we need. Okay, so I started going into this, but I want to share a few more tools with you here about what you can do as soon as you notice you've been triggered. Okay, as soon as you're noticing, like, something really frustrating has happened, or you're having that reaction in your body, you're noticing that you've been triggered either by your kids or your boss or somebody out in the world. Number one biggest and most important thing to practice here is to take space. Step away. And boy, oh boy, is this a hard one. Because for me, the reaction is immediately to fix the problem. Quick, no, that's not what I said. Don't hate me. Don't be mad at me. Here's what's going on. The impulse is to be defensive and to fix the problem and to make the other person understand, or just kind of make it go away. So one of the biggest tools that I am continuing to practice and being tested in, and I'm not anywhere near perfect on it, is to take that space. If you're noticing that I am really upset right now, can we talk about this tomorrow? Give me, like, I need a minute, right, to step away. One of the biggest gifts that I've learned and am continuing to attempt to do my best at is to never communicate with another human while you're feeling very triggered, while there is a lot of emotional energy and your rational brain and your normal communication skills are completely offline. You will only do more damage. And I accidentally got caught up in this recently with a friend, and it just made things worse. And reminded me again, like, okay, I do need to sleep on things. I need to wait to respond, because I'm never going to be an effective communicator when I'm triggered, when I'm in a triggered state. So take this time, and I've been practicing this actually really beautifully with my dad. There have been some big things coming up in repairing our relationship and attempting to do that, some big wounds showing up for me. And I've asked for the space and taken my time before replying to messages or phone calls or communication, so that I can sort through and process my stuff and then come forward and be more able to communicate what I need and what showed up for me and why I was upset and things like that. So take space, step away. And that may be as simple as, this text message chain is I can tell that this is really triggering. I just need some time to process and then would like to talk with you. Can we do that in the next couple of days? Or I'll reach out, right? So the second piece here is asking for that time. If there's another human involved, right? Or even if not, right? Maybe there's a situation that really triggered you and you need to give yourself permission to take the time. So giving yourself time, so either asking for it if another person is involved, or giving yourself that space and booking it in your calendar to process what's coming up. And I just shared that this is what I'm actively doing with my dad, taking sometimes a week or even 2 weeks to respond to a correspondence, because I need to sort through what has landed for me and put together an effective communication of, like, what I need going forward, right? Or what needs to be said. So ask for this time if you need it. Once you get in the habit of this, it's really beautiful just to acknowledge, I am feeling really triggered right now and I'm not sure why. I'm just going to need some time to sort through this, and then I want to have a conversation about it. Right? And ask for that time. But don't ask for it in a way that you need someone's permission. You are taking that time. So maybe it's not about asking for time, it's about stating that I need time. You're not asking someone else's permission to take space. You are telling someone lovingly and setting a boundary and saying, I need to sort through my stuff, and then we can talk again. So that's really, really important. Some other in the moment tools that are really helpful for me, and again, these take practice and consistency before they actually become second nature, but is to connect to your breath. This is the best way to ground in the body, because when we get triggered, we get right up into our head. We're in survival mode. Our nervous system is activated. So even just those 3 deep breaths, closing your eyes, taking 3 deep breaths before responding or before doing any next pieces. Getting out in nature is going to be really important. Actually, this is some of my favorite places to process difficult conversations with people, whether it's on the phone or in person, is actually walking in nature, in the forest or in the trees. There's a lot of like energetic support there, especially when it comes to really heavy stuff. Spending time with your journal is really powerful. So if you've noticed that you've been triggered, if you can, immediately go to your journal and just write it all out, right? But maybe it's later that day or that night that you can come, to your journal and do some processing and do some reflecting. Another really powerful thing to do when you're feeling really triggered is to talk with someone, a third party who is a safe space for you to process, right? So maybe your triggering situation isn't happening live in person and there's a bit of a pause and you could say, wow, I'm like really triggered by this email or this situation that's happening with my employees, and taking that to someone who's a safe space that you can vent with, but not in a way that you're complaining, right? Be very careful. This isn't about playing victim, but just in a way of acknowledging, I'm feeling all these things. This is what's happening. I'm feeling it all. I don't know a way through it or a solution. And just being able to kind of get some of that stuff out can be really helpful, especially when you are in that triggered state. It can really help with processing some of those heavy emotions and helping reground you. As well as, of course, the last thing here is to actively process. So having a really good cry is one of my go-tos. Screaming. When there is frustration and anger, a good scream, maybe punching a pillow, going for a vigorous run, like depending on what emotions are obviously showing up for you, there's a lot of ways to process. But if you're feeling in the moment, like really triggered, sometimes I'll just go outside on my deck, let the sun on my face, maybe even shake my body a little bit, which is a really wonderful way of like moving some heavy, icky energy before responding or before going into things. So again, the most important thing is the pause, right? And then you can start bringing in all these other tools and practice in the moment of being triggered, taking those breaths, stepping out of the room, shaking it out a little bit, getting out in nature. Like there's these things that you can do sometimes immediately, in a triggering situation or in the hours after it. So I hope that that's helpful, right? And really, the invitation now is to understand the next steps, right? When you've been triggered, right? Allowing yourself the time that needs to unfold. One of the beliefs that I used to have, as I mentioned earlier, was when I'm triggered or when there's a conflict, it needs to be resolved right away. And oftentimes it actually can't be resolved right away. I've learned this deeply. And one of the best gifts to any situation, especially an emotionally charged one, is time. So giving yourself the time that you need. And it might seem like an insane amount of time. It might be a whole month before you're ready to like reply to somebody's email. And that's okay. If that's what you need, it's okay. It doesn't matter here as well what the other person needs. Well, of course, like other humans' needs matter, but your needs matter too. So asking for what you need in that space, right? Maybe communicating so you're not ghosting anyone or leaving them high and dry. I'm a really big fan of that, right? Your next steps in a triggering situation, especially with someone else, is to communicate. Communicate what you need. And that might be, I just need a couple weeks to like calm down and then I want to talk, right? So communicating is really important because in triggering situations, especially with other humans, you're both making up your own stories, right? And both of your own stories are not the same. And they're not always true. They're usually not true. They're based off of our trauma patterns and our beliefs and our own inner landscape that is trying to keep us safe. So it's really important to stay in communication, even if you're not talking about the triggering event or the thing, but just letting people know what you need, maybe even letting them know that this has nothing to do with you. I'm noticing my traumas being triggered here and I want to work through them before we talk again. Like some of this really conscious communication is such a beautiful gift. The other things that you can start to do here are set those boundaries, right? These are the big next steps after the triggering situation is communication, set your boundaries, right? Asking for what you need. And then deciding from there, what are your next steps forward, right? Is there repair that needs to happen in a relationship? Is there more emotional processing you need to do from that person who cut you off in traffic? Or is there conversations that need to have with your boss at work? What are the longer term steps? Once this situation has shown you some wounds or some things, how are you going to work on that, right? This is the next piece. It's not just saying, oh, okay, interesting. This triggering situation really taught me that I still don't feel like I'm enough. And my core wound here around really not feeling like I matter and that I'm enough is being triggered, right? That's one thing. But what are you going to do to then work on that so that next time, maybe it doesn't trigger you as deeply, right? There's obviously a lot of work that we can do on our core wound around not feeling enough, right? And this is where working with someone like a somatic therapist or a coach like me, or doing psychedelic work. Like there's so many different tools that we can use to go in and rewire those old belief systems and our wounds, right? To heal our inner wounds. So what are those next steps for you? So those are a couple of the longer term things that I want to point out here. Once you've been triggered, how you can not only really reflect and take the space, and this might take weeks for you to really understand why you were triggered. By the way, this isn't immediate. And that's why I'm taking space from a lot of what's going on for me right now is because I don't want to respond in a triggered state. And I don't fully understand why I was so triggered. And I'm allowing myself the time to just percolate on that and spending time sitting with myself and my journal and thinking about it, talking about it with my safe spaces, and just allowing that to come unfold as it will. So your action item here, as we wrap up this episode, is really to begin this week, right now, right here, to pay attention to triggering situations that show up for you and begin practicing taking the space each day. Maybe it's not in the moment of being triggered. It might be in bed at night, right? To reflect on what this situation is teaching you about yourself, not about the other person, right? This isn't about, oh, this taught me that this person is mean and I shouldn't be friends with them and I should quit my job and all these things, right? This is about, no, what is it showing me about me? Again, inviting in the mirror, inviting in the introspection here. And when you start seeing life this way, this is how we heal. This is how we grow, right? Instead of deflecting and playing victim, you're in the driver's seat of healing your addictive patterns with food, healing your emotional wounds, healing your traumas, healing your body, your physical body. You are in the driver's seat. And this is the most empowering place to live from. And I hope that you all begin to do this and really take what I've shared today and begin this process. And of course, if you want to dive even deeper into this, it's going to be a big part of what we are literally practicing together in person at the Sugar Freedom Embodiment Retreat at the end of July. So friendly reminder, there's still some spots left and I would love to have you join us. It's going to be such an incredible 5 days of women in connection, community, good, delicious food. And we're going to be doing some amazing deep work together and learning how to actually put this into practice in relationship with other people, which is not something that we can do on Zoom. In my groups, as powerful as that is, this is why I'm creating this space for us to come together in person in a retreat setting so that we can actually be in interpersonal relationships for an extended period of time to work through things that come up. And I guarantee you at the retreat, there will be triggering situations that arise, right? Maybe dinner's late or, someone said something that upset you. And there in real time, I will be supporting us as a group to navigate through and start using these triggers as tools. So this is going to be one of the really neat gifts that we will be navigating through at the retreat. Instead of avoiding triggering situations or ignoring them or keeping them to ourselves, we're going to bring them up together and use them as a chance to grow and heal together. And I've been a part of retreats where we've done this, and it is the most healing, magical, incredible gift. And I'm so excited to be leading in this way and hosting this retreat in this way as well, because ultimately the women who are joining, and I know the ones who have already registered and said yes, are ready to do this work, right? Ready to actually heal these inner wounds and change these patterns so that we're no longer coping and numbing out and escaping with food on a daily basis. So if that resonates with you at all, come and join us at the upcoming retreat. You can find the link, of course, in the show notes below to come and check out all the details, grab one of the last spots, and come and join us this July at this beautiful oceanfront property on the coast of British Columbia, near where I live, which is going to be so fun to be together in person. So thank you so much for tuning into another episode. I so loved having this conversation, especially because it's so relevant and alive in my body in this moment as I'm going through some things. And I invite any feedback, any thoughts, please feel free to always reach out to me, send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to hear what's coming up for you around this and what you're learning, this week as you begin to practice leaning into these triggering situations and using them to help you fuel your growth and your healing. All right, everyone, we will see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.